Welcome back to another video. This video we will discuss the topic I've been asked to cover here is how I build my lab. My lab consists of a single computer. I'll give you the specs here. So basically, I'm running Windows 10 Pro. I'm running a AMD Ryzen 7 2700 8-core, 3.2 gigahertz. I'm running 32 gigs of RAM, soon to be 64, as soon as these crazy prices go away. As I said, I'm running Windows 10 Pro with version 20H2, and that's pretty much what my hardware is. Now, I also have a RX 570 video card, nothing big, just two 27-inch monitors, and give you an idea here what working. So if you go to a PC part picker, you can pretty much go through my equipment. I didn't pay this. I bought this machine probably early in maybe early 2020, just before the shutdown, or as the shutdown happened for the pandemic that's going on. So this is the CPU I purchased, the motherboard I purchased. It's about right what I paid for it there. The memory, a little less than that. I think I paid about $169 originally. This is Canadian dollars too, by the way. I also have a 3 terabyte hard drive. That's my secondary drive for storage. I have an SSD, solid state, not a solid state SSD. I'm actually using an NVMe for my OS. So that's my OS for 1 terabyte, and I also have a terabyte extra storage. That's where I stick my VMs. Mentioned I have an RX 570 8GB video card. I'm not really a gamer. I don't play games, so I don't really care about the gaming cards. Just making my computer work and making it do work. That's what I do. I don't really play games. I also have a 650 watt power supply in my system. It's, as you see up here, PCpartpicker.com is a good site to go to. You just choose what country you're in, so it can give you the pricing. It gives you, when you add parts to your list, it gives you a estimated wattage of what you need. So don't fall for these things where you just buy gamer named stuff. Go by what you see, add it in, see what works with it. It'll tell you if it's compatible. If there's any compatibility issues, it will warn you, and it'll give you estimated wattage, what you need. You can save it, and you go forward. And that's pretty much it. And these are the two monitors. They're just simple 1K monitors, I guess, or 1080 monitors. They're good enough for me to use for the usage I have for them. Bigger would be better. I had two 22s originally last year, and I bought two 27s later on. But that's pretty much it. That's not what I paid. I paid around, I believe, maybe close to $1,000 Canadian taxes in, because of the COVID prices. It kind of drove everything up. So that's pretty much what I did to build the system. So that goes the hardware. So now I am running Windows 10. This is my VMware on-prem build. So once I have VMware installed, you just you go purchase this or find it somewhere. I purchased this. I'm running VMware 15 because I do other things with this. As you see, I do Mac. This was, I know license-wise, this is not supported. I don't use this to replace a Mac. I use this to just more play with it on this machine as a test bed, understand the OS, see what happens with it. I'm not a Mac user all day long, so just to get in here to see what I have to do on a Mac in the future, if I need to play with something, or maybe I want to crash an app or test something, see if something works, playing around. So that's really what I do with these. So that's why I have many versions of Mac OS here. I also have 2016 file server. I also have 2019 file server. 2019 server, and I have different roles, as you see here. I have Windows 10 Lab. Now these are all running the 120-day version. I think they're all pretty close to expiring if they haven't already. I don't use them in a production environment, so I just reinstall them, and I recreate every time I create new builds. I just build a new VM and I start up a new system. And lately I've been playing with Ubuntu, or Ubuntu, whichever version you want to call it. Just playing with Linux, just to play with some stuff that I want to learn. And I usually create videos to show you anything you want to learn. So this is my environment, pretty much what I have set up. I've also set up, as mentioned, I have Windows 10. That's my OS. Just use Windows 10 like a normal user. Things I may play with. And I have the Office subscription to the Office so I can have OneDrive, etc. And what I do is when I create a VM, I just say new virtual machine, do typical, and then I will create an operating system later. And if I want to choose Mac OS, I just do this. Now this Mac OS feature isn't here normally. I think I did a video for this a while ago, but you have to do a little hack to the VMware system. I believe I have the file. Probably not up to date, but I can't remember where I have them. But anyway, this is where my lab is, where all my VMs are. There is a little tool you have to run in to get your lab to work for Mac OS. You need to run this little tool, which will basically add the Mac OS OS X functionality. I'm going to dig it up somewhere in a minute. So yeah, so the request was, what do I use for my lab and how did I build it locally? Well, in my case, I added a second drive. Now you don't have to use an SSD. I put a 1 terabyte SSD here just because I had it, because I went NVMe for my OS, so I'd use the other SSD as a second. And I also have a NAS as well, so right here. And so on my SAMI drive, I have a VMlab, and I have, as you see, multiple VMs. And that's what I do. I just create new VMs anytime I need to create one. As you saw, I just create one here. Call it, let's say new. So a new VM, typical. I will install the OS later. I choose, let's say Windows. Let's say I want to put Server 2016. And name it. And of course, you have your place you want to put it. The default's always going to put it in your documents folders. I always, again, move them to a separate drive. This way I know all my lab is in a certain drive. So in here, I usually create a folder. Doesn't matter what you call it. And I can give it a 60 gig or 50 gig, or even if I get 10. Now the OS, of course, won't install. As you see here, it says recommended size 60 gigabytes. So you want to go at least that. If you plan on installing anything, you should always go more. My general basis is 100 gigabytes for an OS now, just to give it some room to play with. And then it wants to split the files in multiple, because if you ever want to try to copy these somewhere else, depending on the partitions style you're using, if it's master boot record or GPT file folder structure, or NTFS or Windows FAT32. So depending on how you copy the file, you may need to have split files. What this does is it may give you performance issues having split disk, because as you start reading this, it has to read the second file. Or if you just create one file, you just say store as one. Most times I say store as one, and then it goes through the build, finishes. So now we have a test VM, and we see here we have test 2021. When we create the VM, as you see, we told it to use 100 gigabytes for disk storage. So what it does here is it creates a VM, the VMDK, that's the virtual disk, the VM disk, and that VM disk is using 12K, so 12 megabytes, and it's not using anything more until you install an OS. So now as you install an OS, you see you get more files, because it's going to expand multiple disks, right, across multiple disks. This is where you get that create a VM and it creates multiple disks. If you do snapshotting, it will also make a delta and keep that off the side as well. I'll show you this in a second. So with this test OS, as you see, there's nothing there. So let's keep this down in the bottom corner, just so you can see it grow. So let's say we want to install the OS. So now what we want to do is you want to manage it, or sorry, settings. And then see how now it's got more folders being created. Every time you do a change, it's making file updated. So now what we want to do is look at the memory. Well, Windows Server will not run in 2 gigs of RAM. Probably recommended to get something like 4. We have 4 gigs of RAM. As soon as you click away from it, it moves up to 4. You can just drag it too if you want to give it 8. So in this case here, I want to give it 4 gigabytes of RAM. Processors through 2 is fine. We don't need to do virtualization because we're not doing virtualization in the VM, so you don't need to check that off. And as it says here, a hard drive we're using there. If we want to expand it, we can expand it because it's turned off, so we can expand it to 110, 120, 130, 140, whichever you want to do. So you can do all your expansions within here. Now, CD, this here is when you want to, so in a normal computer, you would boot up. A physical computer would boot up, and you have no OS. You used to put a CD in the drive, boot up the computer onto a CD. Now you use USB keys. So technically, what we could do is utilize this SATA CD DVD SATA drive. We can actually tell it to use a OS from whatever we want to choose. So we want 2016. So I'm going to pick my ISO file. So it's basically the image of a CD. And we're just going to tell it to use that. The network we're going to use is NAT. Now, in my setup, I don't have anything custom. You can do custom networks. You could do custom VLANs. You could do all kinds of custom things. My lab is very simple, straightforward. You could use Bridge, which when you choose that, the VM will use your network card on your PC and just pass through and use that. If you say NAT, you want to use a shared, right? So as it says here, directly to the physical network, right? So then we do that, and then shared, it's going to share my host IP. So this is going to use my PC's IP. This here on Bridge, it would get an IP from my router. So in this case, let's try Bridge and see what happens with an IP. So on host only means we're going to keep it on the box, won't go off the box at all. This machine here, the physical machine. So I usually go between Bridge and NAT. Let's leave it on Bridge for a second. USB, you could choose if you want 1, 2, and 3. If you're going to use USB with a VM, that's a default. Leave it. Sound card, leave it. Printer, there's nothing, no virtual printers right now. And display, you can change it if you want to try and give it a little more powerful graphic. You can do that as well. Now, in a lot of my VMs I've set up, I've never gone into these settings. So let's go to options. So in options, you can choose what you want to call it, the operating system you're using. Let's say you decide after you put 2016, you want to go up to 2019. Well, you notice 2019 is not supported in here. But 2019 and 2016 are very close, so you could just leave that on 2016. And you can use 2019 OS. Now, the reason why 2019 is not in here is because of the fact that the VMware version I'm using, it's 15. Now, 15, there was no such thing as 2019, so you have to do some updates to bring this VMware Workstation version up to date further to get yourself the more compatibility with OS. But like I said, you can use 2016 and run 2019 because they're really the same OS. It's all the patches and everything. So Windows 10 is Windows 10. But now, as I showed you, we're at 20H2. That's just another update path. That's all 2019 is, an update path from 2016. So they just decided to add 2019 to give it a new refresh. But yeah, if you were using 2012 and you upgraded the OS to 2016, you can then go, okay, make it 2016, done. And then you can choose where you want to have the working directory. And if you need to do enhanced keyboard or anything, you can. You can also set up what to do when you first power it on, what to do. You can do share folder. So if you want to connect some folders from your PC to allow it to have access to some files, you can enable it. And then you can put a share. And then you can actually put a path from your PC. So let's say here, let's say I want to share this directory. So the VM could actually see these as if it's you could see this folder, as if it was a map drive. So you could do that. I'll cancel that for now. And then snapshot. Now, you can take snapshots in time. So let's say you have a VM running and you take a snapshot. You're taking a freeze frame of that VM at that time. What this does is it then creates the VMDK down here. It creates another copy of it. and basically it keeps that one file pristine so no changes are made to it. So if you ever had to go back, you could go back to that stage of your settings and go back to it, even though you've made a bunch of changes past that. That's what a snapshot's for. So this is good. The reason why in a test environment, this is okay. You can then make a change before you go to your production machines. You can make a change here and see what effect there is on it. If there's a bad effect, you can just back out by removing the snapshot. If it goes okay, then you just say get rid of the snapshot. It will then merge all your changes into the current version to bring it up to date. So your deltas will go away, and I'll show you that in a couple seconds. And you can tell it here to revert back. So snapshot when powering off, revert, leave it alone, or just, right, default is just power off. You don't want to revert, but you can go in and say, ask me every time I power this off, do I want to revert, take a new snapshot, or move forward? We can do that too. But by default, it's just power off. Auto protect, you can also set this thing up to automatically make snapshots after so many times. So if you're continuously doing development, you can then have it automatically throw some snapshots to just cover you to be able to back out anytime you do things rather than having to go manually do that. Guest isolation, that's to isolate this machine from your PC. So you can actually enable drag and drop something from your computer, for instance here, and drag it into the VM if it was powered on. Access control, this gives you encryption, gives you some more items to further protect your VM. VM tools, you could tell it to sync time with the computer, so the time here could be synchronized. And you can also tell it to automatically keep the VMware tools updated. Now what VMware tools are is it's a suite of tools installed in your VM to give it driver. So on your physical machine, you first install Windows, and then you need to install what they call chipset drivers. That's the motherboard drivers to talk to all the hardware on the board. So you need drivers for Windows to know how to talk to all that equipment. So that's what chipset drivers will do. So VMware Tools is a very similar set of those drivers to give it the VMware drivers for the video card, the controller, the motherboard, the virtual motherboard. Give it also some tools to talk to the host. So in this case here, VMware Workstation can talk to the VM to keep things up to date, to monitor it and do all those things. In an ESXi environment, like a professional data center, it would then use the VM tools to do a heartbeat to make sure, is the VM running? Is it running solid? What's the CPU state? What's the memory state? All those features and functions could be monitored by the host OS. Vnc connections, you can use VNC to VNC into the VM if you wanted to turn this on, just like RDP in Windows. Unity, what you can do with Unity is, let's say you installed an old application like Access 2002 on this VM and you can't install in Windows. You could say Unity and it would actually put that icon on your desktop. When you click on an icon, it would go into the VM and use it in there rather than your PC. So this is a way of using old applications with your PC that's not compatible in that OS that you're currently running in. This is, if you remember back on Windows XP, they had a VM mode where you can go in and the virtual mode would actually let you run old applications in a virtual environment. So it had the Windows mode, right? Or Windows XP mode in Windows 7. You could go back into the old OS while the people were trying to cut over XP up to 7. That was a function they had. An appliance view, if you have an appliance, you can put the version of this and set up your ports to get inside the appliance as well. An auto log on, so when you first turn on the machine, once you install Windows, you can have an auto log on automatically. And of course, there's other settings like grabbing your input, saving data, almost like a keylogger kind of thing. And of course, you could choose whether you want to use BIOS or UEFI. And this here allows for OSs, so newer OSs or older OSs, if you had to choose which one you want to use. So that's pretty much what you do for every VM. So in this case, let's do that. We've attached the OS. Now what we're going to do is power it on. And we'll see over here to power on. And it has a CD, so we want to push, right? We've included the CD for the image for 2016. So this will then go through and try and install 2016. Now, as you see down here, right? They want to install the VM tools. So once it boots up, finish installing. Once you do that, it will then go forward in the configuration setup of this VM. So now, remember the file structure. We powered this on, and now suddenly, right, there's a temporary file, right? So let's keep going. So install now. Now, pay attention to the VMDK stuff, right? The VMX is the configuration of the VM. So you'll see these files start growing once you start installing. So install the OS. What we want to get to is the disk. We want to tell it when to use the disk. Right now it's using CD ISO. So let's custom, there's the disk there. So let's say next. So now it's going to start copying files. Watch what happens to the file size. Right? Keep refreshing. I want to see that file size grow. So right now it's getting ready. $12,864, right? So take a snapshot of this. Right? Snipping tool. Okay. So there you go. There's how big it was. See what happens as it grows. 6%. So it's using a temp space right now to hold them in. That's why this drive isn't growing anything yet. See here, not growing. So we have to wait a couple seconds for it to do this. Now up here in VMware, right, you can manage snapshots, you can revert, right? You can take a snapshot. Let's say if we take a snapshot, right? Snapshot 1. So remember what I said, it takes the VMDK file. So there's the VMDK. See how it grew already? And now look at this. There's the initial snapshot, the original file, right? And then look what it's done. So now we have snapshots there. So now if we get rid of the snapshot, we could say, right, we want to delete. We're going to delete the snapshot. And then you're going to see the 001 files. You're going to see them go away in a second. So it's going to clean up those files. See how they're gone now? So when you create a snapshot, like I said, it creates Delta files, basically as a hold in place, so it can go back. That's all it does. It just clones the disk and keeps a copy of it that's not affected by anything you do. So now we've already got out of our snapshot mode, and it really doesn't do its justice. We're doing this during this install. I could show you a snapshot mode where we mess up the VM and then we recover by just going recovered back from snapshot. So as we saw, here's the first 2020 VMDK at 12 megabytes. So now it's at 2 gig. So the OS is installing. It's going to take probably, what's Windows take now? 80 gigs. So we'll see this grow. And as you saw there, there's the name of the file, right? Snapshot metadata, because there's no snapshots now, it's gotten rid of it. So now we'll just sit and watch that grow. So this VM is installing. So basically my computer, as I showed you, I'm running an 8-core. Now go back to here. Get you. So even though this is an 8-core CPU, it's got, I love you. So this new version of update of Windows 10, you can't see your system device. Right, so now let's go to Device Manager. And it's popping on my second monitor here, so I'll pull it back. So my Device Manager now shows all my hardware. Let's go to here to process. As you see here, it's a little more than 8 cores. So 8 cores, 16 threads. So technically in a VM world, I have 16 CPUs. So right now I'm able to run this VM running 2 CPUs. Now I have 32 gigabytes of RAM, right, as well. So I could get rid of all the ones that aren't running. Usually in VMware Workstation, every time you run one, it puts up in the bar here. I've had almost all of them running at one time, so I want to add more RAM. So depending on how many VMs you are able to run, it's all based on your RAM and CPU. So if right now you have one VM running, 2 gigabytes of RAM and 4 gigabytes of RAM. So if I want to turn on, let's say I want to turn on this one, so I power it on, that's going to take 16 gigs of RAM. So I'm going to fire that one up, and then I'm going to go to this one. This one here is 8 gigs of RAM, so 16, 24. So I'm going to pretty much max out my system by running those VMs. So you really have to watch how much resources you allow your system to give you this here. So here's my performance. So as you see, my memory is going up. I have 31.9 gigabytes of RAM available. And then you see quickly as the VMs start up, I'm running 52% CPU. My memory is starting to climb. As you see, it's climbing because I'm starting to utilize all the memory. Committed 20 gigs of RAM, of course, it's going to start hitting a swap file, which Windows does. So these are the two biggest resources that VMs take. So your lab would have to depend on how many you could run, how much memory you offer for each VM. So if you're going to run a VM, you don't want to offer most of your resources to your machine. So in this case here, this machine here is still starting up. It needs 8 gigabytes of RAM to run. So 32 gigabytes of RAM, you can only run maybe two or three maximum VMs at that size, because you can't run more. Really, you can't run more than what you have without losing performance. Once you start hitting the threshold of 100% memory, you're now causing your OS to go out to the disk swap file. In VMware, that's called ballooning. So what will happen in the VMware environment when you do this on an EXXI server, the host will then start utilizing swap file as real memory because you're ballooning the system. So again, we're using Windows, so now it will use a page file, right? Here's your page file, here's how much it's using. So we're driving the system up, right? We're almost at 32 gigs of RAM, and we probably will hit it any minute. So let's move this out of here and make life simpler. And let's shut down this VM, right? This one here is the one that's using 16 gigs of RAM, right? So now I'm going to bring this up here just so you can see this here. So when I go to this VM and I say power off, shut down properly, watch what happens. So you should see 16 gigs of RAM drop. Now it's starting to drop piece by piece. So your VMlab all depends on how much RAM you have on your physical machine. I only have 32 gigs of RAM, so if I utilize it all, I'm lucky to be able to record a video if this video doesn't chop. So as you see, I just dropped half my memory down. So we're fine again. So you really have to watch your lab on how many VMs you want to run. Most times my lab's not running 16 gig VMs. Most times I'm running, this one here I must delete it, but there's 8 gigs. Sometimes you'll see 2 gigs. Sometimes my lab will run 2 gig VMs because I'm not doing much. So if I'm not doing much, it'll run 2 gigabytes of RAM for the VMs, as you see here on my file server, right? They're running 2 gigabytes of RAM because they're not utilizing a lot of RAM, because it's just me logging in, grab a file to dump a file. That's all I'm doing. So in this case, I don't need lots of RAM. So I could run 10, 15 VMs if I want. 10 times 2 is 20 gigs. So I could run 10 VMs running at 2 gigabytes each, and my system will still chug along very nicely. So as you saw, I dropped one VM and now I'm down to half memory. If I drop another, this one here being 8 gigs of RAM, so try this, shut down guest, and you'll see this start dropping again, another 8 gigs of RAM. So if you're looking to build a VMlab, this is how you do it. You just have to know how much you want to run, what you want to try and run. You can't run every one of these VMs because in the configuration you're set at, because you would kill your system. Your system would just max right out and you wouldn't have any performance. You have to always remember your overhead. So if I want to use Windows and it's going to take maybe 10 gigs of RAM to do all this stuff just to bring this open and then add VMs, you need to add how much you want for that. My lab 32 gig of RAM is good. It's okay for most of my usage. I'm trying to record videos. I'm using OBS Studio. Get that out of the way. So my OBS Studio is going to take RAM, as you see, right? My OBS Studio is taking 8% of my RAM, right? Not much memory, but still, it's taking memory. My browser I had up showing you my pricing, right? That's taking memory. It's everything takes memory, right? So with VMware, look, it's taking 0% now because there's nothing really running. You can break down what each VM is taking, right? Most of them. Test VM is probably barely running. Let's check. So test VM, it's now installed. So if we go back to here, you see it's at 5 gigs of usage. So let's see what happens here. So now you can't type in a normal password. You have to give it somewhat of a password. So once we get in, let's see how much usage we have. So we see here the VMDK is running at just over 5 gigs. And of course the network pops up because it gets an IP from my network, right from my router. And we'll open up the file. Now let's see how much space we use. So it's using 89.99, so it's using 10 gigabytes of disk space. But it only uses 5 here. Let's see. Correct? Go back out, go back in, and it's using around 5 gigs storage. So that's pretty good. So I can utilize the storage. I've used 99 to 89, so 9 gigs worth. And this VM will just grow as I bring more files. This file will grow. So the VM is sitting in more of a thin mode. And what thin and thick is think of this is a virtual disk utilizing this much space. Even though it has that much to grow, it's only taking this much space on my physical host until that grows. Whereas if you go to a store and you buy a hard disk, that hard disk is taking up the 100 gigabyte size. So if you bought a 100 gigabyte disk, that would be a physical disk actually has that much space physically assigned to it because that's the physical disk. So that's why you see sizing difference, because it's not really utilizing all 100 gigabytes, but this file can grow to 100 gigabytes. If you go up to the 100 gigabytes and fill it up and the Windows says full, you would then have to power off the VM. And in VMware Workstation, you have to do this because it doesn't let you live add, but you would have to power off the VM and then expand from here. See how it's grayed out? It's turned on. So you can't do live add with a VMware Workstation. In ESXi, the professional or the data center or the hypervisor version, you can go into your VM while it's live, expand the disk live, and it will just take the disk as long as it has it available. As it says here, right? The current size is 9.5 gigs. System free is 346.5 gigabytes, and a maximum size is 100 gigabytes. So the disk is maximum at 100 gigabytes because that's what we gave it. But it has, on the physical disk, we have 346 gigabytes free. So if I want to expand this to 200 gigs, I can, but I have to turn it off first. So I'll show you that now. So you see how we have 100 gigabytes. So let's power off the VM. Now you could do it from here and shut down Windows, or you could do it from here. Power off. Let's say shut down guest. So this video is more showing how to build the lab. As you see, it's very simple to do. So let's go to the disk now. Let's say we want to edit that hard drive, right? So you want to edit that hard disk. Now you can expand. So let's do something like 130. So you give it 130 gigs, you expand it for 30 gigs more. So it's going to expand the file, but as you see, it actually finally shows. It catches up to the space once you turn it off. It will then eventually catch up with what actual disk space it's using. As we saw, it was around 10 gigabytes used. So there it is. So now what's going to happen is this disk is going to give it a maximum size of 130 gigabytes to expand to, even though it's only using 9. So here we go, it's expanding. And as well as that, you can also, once this is done, you can go and change it. Let's say you want to give it 8 gigs of RAM. You can do that. If you want to take it down to 4, you can as well. In an ESXi environment, you can actually do it on the fly. So you can, while it's running, say, give it more RAM, 8 gigs of RAM, so it can expand itself and run better for the environment. So there you go. Now we have successfully expanded it. And now we have to go into the OS to repartition. So even though we've expanded it in VMware, see, 130 gigs, let's fire up the Windows, show you this. Now it's easier to show on Windows. I could put Linux, play with Linux, but just easier for visual. If you're a visual learner, this gives you the visuals of what I mean by expanding your disk. So as you see, we know we're only using 9.5 gig in physical space. So now we're going to log on the machine. And because I turned it off abruptly. So let's look at the disk. So the disk right now is showing it's still 100 gigabytes. Well, now you need to expand it. So that you can go to disk manager or storage. You can go here and do that. Let's do something totally different. So what you want to do now is right click on your start. Open up a command prompt admin. Type in disk part. Now this is disk partition tool, right? So you could say help, and it gives you all the commands. Right now we want to say list disk. So it's going to say you have one disk. So let's select disk 0. So now you have selected this disk. Let's say list disk again. You can use your up arrow key to bring back your commands you've typed. List disk, see how there's an asterisk there now? So that means you've selected that disk. So if you want, see how it says there's 130 gigabyte size, there's free 130 gig, sorry, 30 gigabytes. That's because you've assigned 100 gigabytes. So I'm just going to lower this down here so you can see this. Just below the DOS window, the command line window. So you see how it's 100 gigabytes still. So let's see. Usually you have to type in another command. Let's see if we can expand it. So expand. Right? It doesn't have expand, right? But see that right there, vdisk. Right? It wants to give us what expand is. What about extend? Right? There's no volume. So what we need to do is list volume. So this is just to get used to the command line, right? So now we want to say which volume we want to play with here. So in this case here, volume is C. So the volume 1 would be C. So select volume 1. And then you say list volume. Or you could just go up this. Right, we've selected volume. Let's go list volume. Now I know I typed wrong there. I just want to show you there. So now you see volume 1 is highlighted. So now let's type extend. Now it says drive successfully extended. Okay, so list disk again. And it says there's 0 free and it's 130. Okay, but hang on, it says 99 still. Well, that's because this is just showing you technically just a picture of what it is. Refresh the drive, and now we're at 130 gigabytes of space. So you can use the disk part commands to do this. Now you can also clean the disk too. If you type clean, you would do that. You would clean the disk and clear it. So you might want to just do help and then type in help clean. Right? Tells you all about it. So you can do help extend. and it tells you how to use it. And you just type help again to get the commands, and you can use your arrow keys up and down to type your commands you've done all over again. So now you've just learned a new command in Windows and how to extend a disk. So now once you're done, you say exit, and exit to get rid of the command line window. And now you have expanded your disk from 100 gigabytes to 130. If you want to do it again, you just power it off and do it again. You just keep doing it until you go as far as you want. Of course, remember what I said. Your disk can only go as far as your physical system. So wherever this is, the E drive, so my E drive, right? My E drive is 346 gigs free. Exactly. So this knows that my full physical drive can only handle this much. And the maximum size of this drive you've assigned to it is 130 gigabytes and how much you're using. So this is how you can keep expanding your VM if you need to. You can also compact it as well. That will basically, so let's say you gave it 130 gigabytes and you used 100 and then you deleted 50. And then maybe the file, right? So this file here, back to the test. So this file here shows it's at 10. What if you deleted files? It's not quite 10 anymore. Once you compact it, it will then take away any 0 bytes. So if you don't have any bytes to use on this drive, it will clean them up and release the space. Sometimes it's good on the ball and keeping up with this. Sometimes the VM will just keep unallocated space because you deleted files. Almost like a recovery, because remember, Windows does allow recovery files deleted as well. I'll show you that. So let's say this directory here, Windows user. We go properties. You know, this is previous versions. So if you have previous versions turned on in Windows, you can actually go and recover files. Again, that's another video. We won't deal with that too much, but that just shows you that there's some files that you can delete that will still maintain disk space. And if you run those commands to clean it up, you can then clean up your VM as much as possible. But the intent of this video is just to show how you can build a VM in a lab and what hardware I'm using. Because a lot of people are asking, how do I build my lab? Well, any computer could be a lab. I used to run my videos, my very first videos I ever made were on a laptop with 32 gigabytes of RAM and I think it was a terabyte hard drive, not even an SSD or an NVMe. So you can do this on any hardware you have. It doesn't have to be top of the line. It doesn't have to be a blazing fast water cooled unit, and you can do virtualization on any computer. Really, you're just limited by your resources that you have on your computer. So it's always good to just make sure you take a look at this. Make sure you have the resources you can offer your machine. As you see, I'm running about 5%. I'm not using much, and I can go more if I want to turn on more VM. In this case here, I'm done. I'm going to turn off this VM. It frees up memory. So to do a video, I would just do that, and then I'm done with my VMware and it's gone. And then once it goes through, I go less memory. So that's how I'm able to utilize a VMlab by just opening up my VMlab again. And there it is. And there's really not much more to it than that. So I thought I would just show you the VMware lab, how I built it, what I use to do it, how I monitor it. So I use this to monitor if I'm utilizing too many resources. I have actually pinned my machine out before with an extra couple of VMs and it crashed. It also utilized too much CPU, so my system just hung whenever I needed to do anything. My mouse would drag. As I mentioned, I use OBS Studio. So to record this, it takes this memory as well. Get this out of the way. So my OBS Studio records everything I have. My sound gets choppy. It depends on how much resources you use that you can kill your system. And I don't mean kill your system, it's dead. I mean, you would basically max out on all your resources and your machine, your computer just won't run as smooth as it should. It will just hang and your VMs just won't work right and you won't have an overall good environment or positive experience with it. So that's all you have to do. You don't have to use VMware. You can use any of the other ones as well. I know Linux, when you get Linux, you can do virtualization. You can do parallels on a Mac. You can do the Oracle, why that name escapes me, but or VirtualBox. So you can use Oracle VirtualBox. You can use VMware. There's a bunch of them out there. I just prefer VMware. It's the, in my opinion, it's Cadillac of virtualization. And it just works. I use VMware professionally, and I enjoy the desktop environment as well. I know Hyper-V built into Windows. I think I have it disabled. Yeah, Hyper-V. So you have to install it. All you do is go to your add remove features, and you can install Hyper-V right here. And then you don't even need this. You could just use Hyper-V built in. I don't use Hyper-V because Hyper-V doesn't support using the Mac OS, and just the way I like using VMware Workstation. It's a nice product. I've always liked it. I've been using it since 2004. It's just been too many years of my using it, experience and expertise working with it. I just enjoy it. So my environment has always been like this. And the good thing about this is, what if this was the ultimate lab being portable? I have, in the past, this has been an external drive. It was an SSD drive plugged into my USB port, USB 3, and I would run my VMs through that USB port. And then when I took it to my laptop, I could fire up the VMs on my laptop. If I took it to another machine, I could do VMs on that machine as well, as long as it had enough resources to run the VMs. So this lab can be totally portable. So this whole folder can be just taken with you anywhere you want. I've seen people run the VMs, take them on a USB key with them. So when they want to do presentations, they can actually fire up a VM on the person's computer using Vmware Player. When you install VMware Workstation, it comes with a free player. You can also download it for free. If I have it here, program files, VMware Workstation, and there is a VM player that comes with this right here. So VM Player is free. So it lets you play VMs just like a video kind of player. So you can open a VM machine. I can go right to my other drive, and I can open up, let's say, well, let's try the test one we just made. So the test. So if I want to open that up in VMware Player, I can. And because it's owned by the other one, it says, do you want to use it? Yeah, take ownership. Of course, it's not going to let me because this is open. If I close this and then do it, it should let me there. So now I can just play VM. So you can actually take this portable with you. You can install this portably on a USB key and take this player with you as well as the VM. So now anyone's computer, you can fire this up. So that's why I enjoy VMware so much, because it allows me to do this anywhere. I don't have to worry about installing anything on their computer. I can get a VMware player and just use it. So there you go. There's the VM playing in a player. And same thing, shut it down. So this is why I prefer to use VMware as my test lab. There's just so many pluses for this that I enjoy. I'm not saying the others can't do it. I just enjoy using what I do with this. So hope you enjoyed the video. We'll bring some more videos, and if you have any other content you'd like me to cover, please mention down below. If you would like to subscribe and see more videos I have coming, I'm not a daily video creator. I just make videos every now and again whenever I can because of my busy schedule. But I do try to keep an eye on the comments, and if anybody needs help or questions, I usually try to jump in and answer them as soon as I can. I do this for a living. I enjoy what I do, and the lab is just something I do as my hobby, so to speak, because I really enjoy virtualization and I really enjoy using computers. Been using them since 1983. Commodore VIC-20, 64, all those computers all the way up. So if any experienced people out there now, they'll know what machines I'm talking about. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed the video, and hopefully I didn't ramble too much. Have a great day.